Welcome to In Her Words, Working Conversations by Women. I'm your host, Thando Mazibuko. Today, we're talking about a reality that so many families carry but rarely name. You can be told your child cannot be deemed societally normal and still discover that they're exactly who they're meant to be. Our guest is Brigitte Shipman, an author, life coach, and a mother to Joseph, who is autistic. Together, they've written a mother's guide through autism, through the eyes of the guided, a book that flips the script. One side shares Bridget's journey as a mother guide, the other shares Joseph's perspective as the guided. This isn't a story about fixing, it is about seeing. It's about moving from grief to hope, about advocacy, acceptance, and the radical power of loving kindness. If you're a parent, a caregiver, an advocate, or simply someone who believes that the difference is not deficit, this conversation is for you. Brigitte, welcome to In Her Words.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming onto my show. You write in the book. You call yourself a mother guide in the book. What does being a mother guide mean?
Right. So actually, a mother's guide is from Joseph's perspective. When I had decided, I feel like I was called to do this work. Rather than retiring, I started advocating again. I've been doing this on and off for 30 years. And I asked Joseph, hey, if we're going to do a podcast together, what should we call it? And he said, I go, well, Joseph, what have you been to me over these years, as your mom? And he thought about it and he said, well, at first, he said, I see you as a man with a long white beard, stroking your long white beard on top of a mountain. I said, oh, cool, wisdom. And then he thought for a moment and he said, no, you've been my tour guide of life. Mm-hmm. And so it became Mother's Guide. And I'm using Joseph's explanation for it because all of this is because of him. I wouldn't be doing any of this without him, right? So I thought that was such a cool way to look at it and such a great way to parent because, as Joseph says, I pointed him. I didn't tell him what to do. I showed him how and let him figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Which every parent should be doing, whether a child is autistic or not, if we're being completely honest.
Yes.
Your book is titled A Mother's Guide Through Autism, and it literally flips the script and shares Joseph's perspective. What first moved you to create, well, you spoke about you guys having the podcast, but where did this idea come from that you should share his story from his perspective, his voice? And who did you hope would read this book?
Honestly, I wanted to reach as many parents that I could. And I'm a mom, so I write from a mother's perspective. All parents parent differently. It's not to put anybody in a box, but I can't speak for other people, so I can only come from my perspective, right? And so the idea was when I started the very first support group for parents here. I live in a very small town, and there aren't resources, right? So I wanted to start something to give people education. I'm a teacher, right? So I wanted to teach and help other parents figure things out and help myself. And so I wanted to pass the baton to Joseph. When Joseph and I would go to these meetings, everyone directed the questions to me. And he was getting older and older, and I thought, why isn't anyone, when he turned 18, we helped another group start. I thought, I think the question should go to Joseph. He's the one who knows these answers. I'm not autistic. I don't know what it's like. I know what I've observed, and I know what I taught and tried to guide, but Joseph is the one. So I thought it was very interesting to go, okay, here is my life with autism. And you literally flip it over and you get Joseph's perspective. We were there the same day. He was having a good day. I was having a horrible day in grief, or vice versa. And sometimes we both had a great day, you know. So it's really two different lives sharing the same experience.
That's so true. And you've put it in such a great way to share.
Thank you.
What did you learn the hard way? Because when Joseph was first diagnosed, you focused entirely on finding him therapies, and you kind of put yourself at the back burner. And it cost you your well-being. And what did you have to learn the hard way? And how did you overcome those battles?
Oh my, that is years of not taking care of myself. You know, I didn't even consider it. That thought of, oh, Brigitte, you should really get some rest. Oh, you should really, have a me day. Though that thought never entered my mind. Every single day, and I have another son too, was about my children. And my family too, but really Joseph is 5 years older than my youngest son, and those first 5 years were just all about Joseph. And then how does Joseph and his brother, how do I be I want to be not a good parent, a great parent. Mm-hmm. And how do I help him? How do I find answers? So let's fast forward. I had lots of your body speaks to you. And I didn't listen. I had plenty of warnings along all these years, and I became hypothyroid. Then I became a type 1 diabetic. I almost died from that. Had no idea. Then, it just kept going. My autoimmune system basically broke down. And it wasn't until I was really in my 50s before I started healing and educated myself about myself, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes complete sense, because a lot of women and a lot of mothers focus entirely on pouring into their families and their children, and they don't pour into your own cup. So it's what I'm learning having this podcast. I'm not a mother, but with a lot of older women that I've learned is that so many sacrifices that you make for others and leave yourselves, and we need to change that as women.
And I will say this, I have. And guess what? Because of the way I look at the world now, my family dynamic is happier than it has ever been, because I'm happier than I have ever been. And I know that is a very difficult concept for moms in particular, I think, because we are not saying dads aren't nurturers. My husband was a great dad, but I'm just saying that and especially before all the self-compassion and self-care movement came through, in my time, that wasn't there was no talk about self-care. It just didn't exist. So my message, and that's one of the first things I ask a mom, is what are you doing to help self-regulate yourself? What are you doing to really, truly calm your nervous system? Because if you're not, guess what? Your child's not either.
Because if mom's not happy, no one's happy.
That is the truth.
Mom's not happy, the whole family's like on edge. Mom is not okay.
It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah. You write about moving from grief to hope and from pain to loving kindness. So what was the turning point and what made the practice or mind shift the biggest difference for you?
I think there are a couple things that come to mind. And I would have to say, when I started the Martha Beck Life Coach program, and somebody actually asked me deeper questions than, hey, how you doing? And, required really deep reflection and thinking. That was a turning point. Another turning point for me was when Joseph was older, and we were just relaxing one day, floating around in a pool. And I just asked him, because Joseph is a philosopher, and I love talking to him. And he is one-liners that just absolutely, it's one aha after another. I asked him what he thought my life lesson was. And it didn't take him a second. He just looked up at me and he said, to let go. And I was like, oh, yeah, yes, to let go. That is absolutely, that's why my health broke down. There are good qualities to being, a go-getter and a fighter and taking, I will not take no for your answer. I mean, those are good things too, but not at the expense of your well-being. So I think it's creating a balance. And so those are just two examples. I really do feel like it's a God thing, how I've been led to this moment, speaking to you, because this is purpose. We all have it. And realizing that, right? Just kind of, if you can just kind of sit back and not really look at you. I mean, it's from a watcher perspective, not from, I've got to do this. It's not your to-do list. It's looking at yourself from maybe how somebody else would look at you, especially your child.
Yeah, that's true. And it is a purpose because now you're reaching with your voice an audience that you would probably never have reached before in South Africa.
Oh, absolutely.
And
you're not wrong.
And that is because you stepped into your purpose and your life lesson, as Joseph said, of letting go.
Yeah.
You offer, about speaking about life lessons, you offer 7 lessons in advocacy and 5 steps to advocating for a parent who feels overwhelmed or unheard or exhausted by the system. What's one small step they can take today?
Be kind. I wrote a whole chapter on advocating with kindness. Have kindness be your superpower. Because what I have learned is that if you are let's use IEP meetings, for example, in advocacy. That is the big topic, right? Where the educators dread it, right? And the parent dreads it. And we're all on the same team trying to help this human being. And so I take the responsibility for my child as far as I know him best. So I feel like because I know Joseph best, when I enter, let's say, an IEP meeting for their education, for their school year coming up, how I want to help the teachers help my son is by being kind. Because if you walk into those meetings demanding that they this or this or this, it's really understanding that there may be one teacher in 30 years that really shouldn't have been in education. Not a bad person, just didn't have a clue, right? We run into those people. So they're going to come into that meeting fearful. They're going to become defensive because guess what? They know they don't know. So how can I get this person to just ask me for help. Let's create a team. You are the quarterback. I use that as an example, but you're the head of your wolf pack. And in order to lead that wolf pack, let kindness be your guide.
That is a good lesson, because a lot of people forget to be kind to others. A lot of the time. Self-compassion and gratitude, as well as kindness, are a central message in your book. For a mother who feels guilty, ashamed, or like they're failing, what is one thing you'd like to invite her to carry today?
Yes, I think that if you have a crazy, I call them crazy monkeys because they are, and you can tell I love The Wizard of Oz and Wicked and that whole, I used it in my classroom too. And I feel like if you let those negative thoughts control you, you're going to become a negative human being. So I think the first step is to notice, because when you notice, you then become aware. It's very difficult to feel joy, gratitude, and hope if all you're thinking about is what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if Joseph won't ever be independent? What if Joseph never speaks? What if? If we live in that negative energy, we train our minds to be negative. It's just the truth. And it's a lizard brain, and we have to practice it. And the best way to practice that, and I had to do it, everything that I talk about, I did. Start your day, even if it's before you ever get out of bed, just one piece of gratitude. One piece of gratitude. Feel it, own it, and then live it. It doesn't have to be big.
That's true. And thank you for that. What was one thing that was very surprising to you that came from Joseph? I know you say he's a philosopher, but when he wrote the book with you, what was one thing that really you didn't think would come from him in this journey of writing this book together?
What he really thought of me as his mom. Every time I read, I didn't read Joseph's work before we turned it into the editor. I didn't read it. I wanted him to have his own space, to speak his truth, to have a voice. Okay? I don't feel like Joseph has had the opportunity to be heard. And he's way more interesting than I am. So I just felt like when I read it, and still, like I can get all teary-eyed when I read his foreword, and when I hear him speak about really how he feels and what our relationship has become, I feel the deepest gratitude. I'm so humbled. I am just so filled with love because I feel that way about him. I didn't know he felt that way about me.
Really? I think that I think that's testament to just, the parenting that and the care that you put into both your sons and Joseph as well. So I think you should be very proud of yourself for that.
Yeah. And honestly, again, it's just kind of like the self-care piece or the self-compassion piece. I've never reflected truly about that. I'm just doing the best job that I can do and don't really expect any rewards or any pats on the back, right? That is the greatest gift I think that I personally can have is to know that my children feel they have confidence because they have felt loved. And it's that simple. I don't need anything else.
Yeah, that sounds so rewarding. You've created something so rare, a mother-son dialogue that centers both voices. What has this, collaboration in not just the book, but in advocating for both voices, children with autism and adults with autism, as well as mothers going through this?
So if I think about that, so if you're asking me, I want to make sure I understand the question. What directly are you asking me? Because my mind went to, there's so many answers I have.
I'm asking, what has this journey of advocating for the voices of, Joseph having his own voice and you as a mother sharing your space with him? Because it's not often where we get to hear someone who's neurodivergent or who's autistic have their voice in this world, So
yeah. So I go a couple of places with that, right? So first of all, I was his voice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that was a very hard transition for me because I spoke for him because he didn't. And you get in that habit because I could see on other people's faces they had no idea what Joseph was trying to say. So his voice, I realized, was speaking a different language. And so when I think about that, there are a couple of messages here. Joseph has a voice, but he didn't know how to use it. So how do we learn how to speak each other's language so that he can become his own advocate?
Mm-hmm.
So it is a process. I would also say that, Joseph has a voice that isn't angry.
Mm.
Okay. So it's important, I think, for anyone, not just somebody who has felt like nobody's listening to me. He has all the answers, but has never had the opportunity to truly be heard. So I think it's really important to make sure your children, even if you have no idea what they're talking about at that moment, you'll figure it out, but let them feel understood and heard so that when they do have a voice, that it's not cynical, that it's not angry, and that it comes with purpose. And that is not easy to do. Okay, you'll go through these hills and valleys to get there. Joseph and I have too. But when you ask me that question, I'm thinking, yes, to advocate is to speak for your children, to then transition into then teaching them how to advocate with love and kindness for themselves.
Thank you for answering that question. I know
Yeah.
it's a bit tricky the way I asked it. For listeners who want to be better allies, whether family members, educators, or employers or friends, what is one action they could take this week to create a more inclusive space, do you think?
Yes. That is a so if I do it from the educator's perspective, okay, and then I'll do it from the parent perspective because I have both. I think every single classroom should be set up for neurodivergent people, period. Mm-hmm. So my classroom management is all about sensory. It's all about, and before I was a mom, and my classroom operated that way. Because I feel like if you can create a peaceful classroom, a peaceful teaching environment, then that is inclusion, right? Because you're going to be able to notice if this child over here cannot sit still, they cannot sit in their seat, they cannot do the traditional learning. Guess what? That's over half your class anyway.
Yes.
Just because they're not diagnosed doesn't mean that they're not.
Yeah, that's
okay.
True.
So from an educator's perspective, I think to understand that, just assume that everybody learns different. All brains work differently. And how can I create an educational environment that reaches all needs of learning? And teachers are going to go, what is she talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is we don't teach one way. We teach many ways, right? And so if all you're going to do is stand in front of the class and talk, you're not the majority of in your class, they're not learning anyway. So how can we get creative and do the hands-on learning, the project learning, I need to realize that I probably have an autistic child, an ADHD child, dyslexia, who knows what else I have in here, that it's my job to discover. Okay. So I think setting it up in an inclusive way from the very beginning and not taking it, I have a child in my class now that's autistic, so I've got to do special needs for this kid. And everybody else is going to be taught this way. That's not inclusion, my friends. Okay. The other thing is, from the parent perspective, I would say, again, like I was saying, to advocate with kindness, it is to be able to take the first step is to meet with that beautiful teacher who's going to care for your child for 8 hours a day. And sit down and become friends with the same goal. Like, how can I support you?
Because teachers go through a lot. A lot.
Yeah, and so do parents.
Yeah, sure.
We're both going through a hard time. We need to be friends.
Each other.
Yeah.
Where can our listeners or watchers find your book or find you online?
Yeah. So Joseph and I have a website, Mother's Guide Through Autism.com.
And I will link everything in the description box. So
thank you.
Easy to
find. We have an Instagram, we have a podcast, we have all kinds of things, but if you go to our website, you'll see all of it. So.
And final question for you is, if you would leave our watchers or listeners today with one final blessing, affirmation, or invitation to move this week, what would it be?
I would say meet yourself where you're at in this moment. Every moment is filled with lessons, filled with joy if you want it, filled with anguish if that's what it is. So I don't, that's one of the things I repeat over and over and over again when I work with parents, when I deal with myself, is where am I right now? Meet yourself in any given moment. So what that means is, if you're having a meltdown because you're exhausted and you haven't slept in days, what is one small thing you can do to give yourself grace and love? So let that be your mantra. Meet myself where I'm at. Where am I at in this moment? What do I need?
Brigitte, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your candor and your invitation to see autism as something that is a slight difference and not a deficit, and something worth having dignity over. Our listeners will probably love having this conversation and will I hope they buy your book because it's so needed.
Oh, I appreciate those kind words. And I'm here if anyone needs anything. That's what I do.
And thank you for doing it.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's my honor, honestly.
Thank you once again, Brigitte. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.